Hi folks, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the first episode of I Like Big Boats and I Cannot Lie, a weekly ordeal where I talk about one of my special interests, submarines. Now this show may not be interesting to most, so let's hope it at least bores you to sleep, okay? I'd like to take a moment to tell you that I hope your week has been as good as it can be, and that I hope the coming week ahead is full of as much positivity and joy as possible. I'd like to start with this day in Navy history, September 15th. On this day, the keel was laid for USS Pogey, SS-266. The keel laying is a ceremony formally recognizing the beginning of a ship's construction, usually attended by important people like shipbuilder higher-ups, owners of the ships, people who matter. It's one of 4 big events in a ship's life: keel laying, launching, commissioning, and decommissioning, and we'll talk about all of those today. In U.S. Navy traditions, shipyard officials send out invitations and conduct a ceremony. So people like Electric Boat or whoever will invite the Navy to come by and observe the ceremony. Submarines don't have a keel, but the ship sponsor has their initials welded on a plate during the ceremony of honor on the boat to display that the keel is true and fairly laid. On the same day, the first USS Pollock, SS-180, was launched. She was sponsored by Miss Anne Carter Lauman, daughter of Captain P.G. Lauman. I couldn't find much about either of them, unfortunately. Every ship has a sponsor, traditionally a female civilian. She's supposed to bestow good luck and break a bottle of champagne on the boat. Technically, she is considered a part of the crew, a part of the ship, and personally, I think that's quite lovely to believe that someone's goodwill and good luck could go with all the sailors serving on board. Pollock shows up later this week on the 21st with a decommissioning in 1945. Also on the 15th, the USS Swordfish SSN601 was commissioned in 1958. A commissioning happens when a ship is placed into active service. Much like everything else in the Navy, it's an important part of naval tradition. The Swordfish was a Skate-class nuclear-powered submarine, the second one to be named for a swordfish. For those of you who don't know, submarines are built in classes, and those classes almost always bear the name of the first sub in that class. Typically, the ships in a class all bear a similar design, almost like a brand of a car. According to what I can find, and mind you, most of this is from Wikipedia and naval websites, this 267-foot-long submarine, powered by an SW-3 reactor, could reach a speed of 18 knots. Ship's complement was 87 sailors, with Commander Shannon D. Kramer, Jr. in command at the time of commissioning. USS Shark SSN591 was both decommissioned and struck from the Naval Vessel Register on the 15th in 1990, ending a long career that began in 1957. She was the last of the Skipjack class submarines to be taken out of service. After decommissioning, she was taken to Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington, and entered into their ship and submarine recycling program, where she was cut up. The Puget Sound Shipyard comes up a lot here. It's the only place that does nuclear submarine recycling. So they've reduced a lot of ships into scrap metal. Maybe I'll talk a little more about Bremerton in the future. I think their history is quite interesting. Moving on to September 16th, 1960, we have the USS Jack SSN605 and the Robert E. Lee SSBN601. The USS Jack's contract was awarded to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which is in Kittery, Maine. Her keel was laid down there on the 16th of September, 1960. Their motto was, "We try harder," which for some reason is funny to me. She was a variation on the Permit class, with an extra 20 feet in there somewhere, bringing her total to about 297. She used, quote, an experimental direct drive plant with 2 contra-rotating propellers on concentric shafts, so the propellers were smaller and made less noise. I stole that quote entirely from Wikipedia, don't worry. I'm not smart enough to have come up with that one on my own. On that very same day, the Robert E. Lee SSBN601 was commissioned. She was the 3rd nuclear-powered ballistic submarine to join the fleet. One interesting thing about SSBNs is that they have 2 crews, blue and gold, and they share the ship. So when she was commissioned, Commander Reuben F. Woodall commanded the blue crew, and Commander Joseph Williams, Jr. commanded the gold. The Robert E. Lee was built by Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, and she operated around Newport News, Virginia, until December 2nd, 1960, when she went to Narragansett Bay operating area for torpedo firing tests. She has a really fascinating history from there on, all the way until December 1983, including removal of her missiles and reclassification as an SSN, or Fast Attack Submarine. On September 17, 1945, the USS R-15 SS-92 was decommissioned for the final time after being commissioned July 27, 1918, decommissioned in 1931, and recommissioned in 1945. The R-class submarines were used as coastal and harbor defense boats from 1918 until around 1945. R-15 was built by Bethlehem Shipbuilding in San Francisco. It wouldn't be till October when R-15 was struck from the Naval Register. However, that same month she was sold to Macy O. Scott of Miami, Florida, possibly for scrapping purposes. On September 17, 1942, the USS Ho SS-258 was launched at Groton, Connecticut by the Electric Boat Company. Electric Boat is another one you see quite a bit. They build a ton of submarines. They've been doing it for quite a while. They must be very talented. I imagine their shipbuilders and planner people and draftsmen get paid quite well there. USS Ho was named for, quote, one of various sharks, especially the dogfish. Okay, sure. She was sponsored by Miss Helen Hess. The very next day, Ho's sister ship, the USS Scamp SS-277, was commissioned. The Ho, the Scamp, and all the Gatto-class subs in general were built to be battle submarines with speed, endurance, and armament to withstand World War II conditions. They're meant to scout ahead of the fleet and report back. At 21 knots, I imagine they were pretty fast for the time. They had 6 forward torpedo tubes and 4 aft ones, so they could shoot any of their 24 torpedoes out the front or the back. They also had deck guns and cannons, which is very cool. Sadly, while Ho endured and was sold for scrap in 1960, Scamp had only a very short career before being sunk by a Japanese escort ship sometime around November 11, 1944. Jumping way forward in time, September 18, 1982 brought the launching of the USS Portsmouth, built by the Electric Boat Division of General Dynamics in Groton, Connecticut. She was sponsored by Mrs. Helen Poe Goodrich. The 688, or Los Angeles class, is a series of fast attack submarines, mostly named after towns and cities. The only exception is the Hyman G. Rickover, who's considered the father of the nuclear navy. They cost $1.86 billion in 2023 currency. Wow. I mean, I know the Navy just throws money at things, but that's a lot of money. And they made a ton of these boats. I can't imagine. Wow. On the 19th, we have the commissioning of the USS Plunger, SS2, way back in 1903. Plunger was the lead boat of her class and was later renamed A1 in November of 1911. She was commissioned at the Holland Torpedo Boat Station. She was commissioned at the Holland Torpedo Boat Company Yard at Holland Torpedo Boat Station in New Suffolk, New York. Holland Torpedo Boat Station is where the first submarines were stationed, and apparently they claim to be the first submarine base. The U.S. Navy disagrees. They say the first base is Naval Submarine Base New London in Groton, Connecticut. They were commissioned in 1916 as a dedicated submarine base. Plunger had a visit from President Roosevelt in August of 1905. He stayed for several hours throughout some dives. I wonder what that must have been like, diving on a submarine in 1905. I mean, I wonder what it's like now. I bet it's a lot of fun, but personally, I wouldn't want to live on one. The cramped quarters and the idea that once you're in it, there's no way out. I can't just ask to leave. It's really scary to me. I think I'll stay on land. The 19th also saw the final decommissioning of the R-18 SS-95 after 27 years of service. I feel like that's a pretty long time for a submarine in that era. She went to New Hampshire for inactivation, was struck from the Naval Register in October of 1945, and sold for scrap to the John J. Duane Company of Quincy, Massachusetts in 1946. On to the 20th of September in 1945, the 04 SS-65 was decommissioned for the final time after recommissioning in January of 1941. At the time, she had been the longest submarine in service. At the time, she had been the submarine in service for the longest period of time of 27 years, 4 months. She was stricken from the Naval Vessel Records on the 11th of October, 1945, and scrapped in February of 1946. The 16O class submarines were built as coastal patrol boats during World War I. All of them were commissioned throughout 1918 and built quickly to serve the growing need after the United States' entry into the First World War. 01 through 010 were designed by Electric Boat, but 011 through 016 were designed by